You're listening to a Roddenberry podcast.
Mission Log, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast, episode 572, Muse.
Welcome into another episode of Mission Log, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast. I'm John Champion.
And I'm Norman Lau. Each week on Mission Log, we watch an episode of Star Trek. We pay close attention to the morals, meanings, and messages, and then we gauge if it stands the test of time, just as you like it.
Yes, all the world's a stage, and all the men and women merely players. They have their exits and their entrances, and everyone here is playing someone on Voyager. With apologies to the Bard, this week, Muse, the one where the plays the thing to get B'Elanna home and stop an alien warlord from fighting his neighbor. Norman, we rarely ever sort of time and date stamp a show, a recording of Mission Log, as we get to record a few weeks ahead, then of course it gets edited, but now is as good a time as any to just pause for a moment, and you've got some news to share with the audience.
Well, on the day of this recording, am I allowed to say the timestamp?
Yeah, sure, why not?
Okay, so we're recording this episode on March 25th, 2025. That's interesting. I never really realized it was the 25th, 2025.
Yeah.
And today was the final day of my chemotherapy treatment / MRI scan, which showed negative. So right now, as of this date, I am in remission from my brain tumor cancer.
It's official.
It's
official. Norman Lau is back.
I am back.
Good to have you here, brother. And I look forward to many more Mission Logs. And I'm proud of what you've done and amazed by what you've been through. And here we are, getting to go boldly into the future again.
I know that I've said this many times across many podcasts that I've been doing during the course of my treatment, but I do want to say I want to thank all of the guest co-hosts that have come on to keep the Mission Log podcast moving forward with all of your insights and your input and your passion and your support. Everyone on the Discord community has been incredibly supportive. I mean, John, Eugene, Earl, the entire team behind Mission Log has been nothing short of godsend to me. And I usually don't do this either, but I have to give pretty much everything, all the credit in the world to my wife, Carol, who has seen me through all of it. And she is my muse for all intents and purposes for this show. So I just want to say, everyone out there, thank you for your wonderful words of encouragement, support, and I'm glad to be back in the chair again.
Nice. Well, I tell you what, that is the perfect opportunity to remind people how they can reach us so that they can send you a kind note, or maybe they've got comments and thoughts about the discussion ahead. So, Norman, if you would, please.
Absolutely. We'd love to hear from you. Mission Log is a conversation about Star Trek. Find us on Facebook at Mission Log Pod and on Instagram and Threads at Roddenberry Podcasts. The conversation always continues in the Mission Log Discord with near-daily live events and 24/7 chat about the topics you love. Get your invitation to our private server by joining patreon.com/missionlog. While you're at it, one of the most important ways to help your favorite podcasts is to leave a 5-star rating and a review at Apple or your preferred podcast platform. And remember, your comments could be used on the show. And now here's John Champion with this week's trivia.
All right, let's get into it. Muse was written by Joe Menosky. I'll give you 3 guesses who wrote the TNG episode Masks, and the first 2 answers don't count. That's right, because it was Joe Menosky. And catching up to more recent history, at least as far as our journey goes, his most recent Voyager script that we discussed was Good Shepherd. Now, this was directed by Mike Vehar, and we just talked about Mike recently as well when we covered his episode Child's Play. Now, the episode was nominated for a Costuming Emmy Award. Robert Blackman liked his work on this one so much that he requested director Mike Fahar try to shoot some additional full-length shots of his actors to show them off. I mean, if you think about it, most of the time on TV, you're shooting kind of like a lot of close-ups, a lot of kind of mid-body up, just to keep things moving around and that you're framing for a smaller screen. Well, in this case, you go back and look and you go, oh, wait a minute, we're actually pulling back quite a bit more than we normally would. And good for him. He got that nomination. Now, let's meet our guest stars. It was a bit of a surprise to me, maybe to you as well, to see such a well-known actor in a small, unnamed part. But there's John Schuck as one of the chorus members. Of course, in addition to his extensive film and stage career, John has appeared in more prominent Star Trek roles already, like the Klingon ambassador in Star Trek IV and Star Trek VI, and then as a Cardassian, Parn, in the DS9 episode The Maquis Part 2. And don't you worry, we will see John twice more when we get to Enterprise. Now, joining John, our other two chorus members are Jack Axelrod and Tony Amendola, and both are making their only Trek appearances with this episode. Jack worked extensively in theater before making the switch to film and TV in the early 70s. His credits really run the gamut. I mean, from his debut in Woody Allen's Bananas to recurring roles on General Hospital and My Name is Earl to features like Super 8 and Hancock. Jack passed away in 2023 at the age of 93. Now, Tony also got his start in theater and is probably best known to genre audiences for the long recurring role of Master Braytak in Stargate SG-1. He also turned up in Terminator, The Sarah Connor Chronicles, and Dollhouse. He was recurring in Once Upon a Time and Continuum, and he shows no sign of slowing down as of this day. Our patron is played by Stoney Westmoreland, and just a few years before this episode of Voyager dropped, he was in Roland Emmerich's version of Godzilla. And while his resume is pretty extensive, and he had a lead role on the Disney show Alex Mack, his career effectively ended in 2018 when he was involved in a criminal matter which, look, let's just say it is best left to the reporting at the time and not on our recording today. Tanis is an actress that you'll see doing her best impression of Captain Janeway. She is played by Kathleen Garrett, and we have seen her before, although as a different alien. On the DS9 episode Vortex, Kathleen donned the pointy ears to play a Vulcan. Her career spans all kinds of TV guest roles and a few features as well. You may have seen her in a few other genre roles, like in The Tomorrow Man and Dark Skies. And you may not remember, but there is a new WKRP in the early 90s in which Kathleen had a prominent recurring role. It also may not surprise you to know that she, too, has a theatrical background and even appeared in a production of Hamlet with none other than Robert Beltran. Another of our actors, Jero, is played by Michael Houston King. Michael has appeared on soap operas like Days of Our Lives and Another World, and he's dropped into some sci-fi as well, like an appearance on Sliders. In addition to acting, Michael has also recently added some writer-director credits to his name, including 4 episodes of a series called One Man's Search for Career Happiness. Lena, also playing the stage version here of 7 of 9, is portrayed by Kelly Waymeyer. Now, Kelly's background includes studying theater at both SMU and USC, and she started her on-screen career in the early 90s. She covered the usual guest role opportunities and had recurring gigs on 6 Feet Under, The Pits, and Wolf Lake, and she had landed another recurring role on none other than Star Trek Enterprise, which likely would have expanded quite a bit more. Tragically, Kelly died from cardiac arrhythmia in 2003 at the age of 36. And finally, Kellis, who is front and center in his creative struggle with his play and, well, also with B'Elanna, is played by Joseph Will. Now, this is Joseph's Star Trek debut, but the franchise kept bringing him back. He does turn up for one more small role on Voyager, and then we will see him for a short recurring stint on Enterprise. If he made it to Vegas for Star Trek The Experience, he also had a prominent role in Borg Invasion 4D. Many other guest roles fill out his career, You may have seen Joseph in everything from Studio 60 on the Sunset Strip to JAG to 24, or recently Law and Order. He even showed up early in his career in Beyond Belief, Fact or Fiction. That one is for you, Alan.
Welcome to the Delta Quadrant. Nothing, and I mean nothing, goes together like Star Trek and togas.
Prologue. On a planet in the Delta Quadrant, an audience in an outdoor theater watches an epic play, The Adventures of Voyager. The chorus recites a captain's log setting the scene. B'Elanna and Harry, brave explorers, set out in search of dilithium. A huge wave crashes down, forcing Harry to escape, while B'Elanna is left behind, battered and broken on the shore. The audience is hooked, especially this one guy in the front row. Kellis, the poet behind the production, is thrilled when his wealthy patron, that's the guy from the front row, demands another installment in just a week. So the pressure is on. But where will he find his next chapter? Not from Lena, his leading lady. She'll have to wait. Kellis has another idea. He hikes out to a remote crash site to visit his real-life secret muse, a wounded, very confused B'Elanna Torres, who has her hands tied, literally, and definitely not in the mood for a creative session. But Kellis greets her with a flourish and declares himself her humble servant. Act 1. B'Elanna is injured and Kellis has kept her tied there because, naturally, inspiration has a tendency to fly away. He's been treating her with bloodletting. Say, who's the barber here? And after some persuasion, he uses a dermal regenerator from the med kit instead. Kellis is in awe. Clearly, she is one of the Eternals from the heavens. He's been putting together her story from log recordings and is determined to turn it into his greatest play yet. B'Elanna, however, has other priorities, like fixing the Delta Flyer and getting out of there. She convinces him to cut away the ropes in exchange for more stories about her journey, but B'Elanna pulls a phaser on him and kicks him straight out of there, telling him not to come back. The next day, B'Elanna shorts out the remaining power in the Delta Flyer by trying to use the subspace transmitter. Kellis returns with food and questions. So many questions. He wants to hear about Earth and Voyager and this great tragedy of the lost Eternals. B'Elanna gives him a vague, poetic version of events, an island at the stars, a powerful being called the Caretaker, but he's more interested in another tale, her love story with Tom Paris. Trying to steer the conversation, she pulls up an image of dilithium on the ship's database. Kellis recognizes it as Winter's Tears and says there's a deposit nearby on his patron's hunting grounds, but getting it would be dangerous, to say the least. No dilithium, no more stories. That's the proposition B'Elanna has for him. A perfectly timed thunderclap drives the point home before she tells him, don't get caught. Act 2. Wow, well, Kellis somehow manages to pull it off and comes back to the flyer with a chunk of dilithium. In return, B'Elanna inspires the next play, The Rescue of B'Elanna Torres. Kellis tells his actors the next day that they have 1 week to prepare. Back to, hey, remember the real Voyager? Well, Tom really wants to take a shuttle to search for B'Elanna and Harry, but Janeway shuts that down, insisting they'll have better luck coordinating from the ship. Back on the planet, the troupe rehearses a very unique take on Tom and Seven. Later in the flyer, B'Elanna's repair of the transmitter is successful for a second. Then it blows up. She asks Kellis to bring her a custom alloy for her next attempt. He agrees, but only if she helps him understand the emotionless Vulcans for the play. Speaking of Vulcans, Tuvok is at work in Voyager's mess hall, and Neelix points out that he hasn't slept in 10 days. Tuvok brushes him off, determined to find the missing crew. Meanwhile, the other Tuvok, the actor playing him in the show, cannot crack how to portray a Vulcan. Kellis explains that underneath it all, Tuvok is feeling more pain than any of them can imagine. This moment of drama interrupted by another one when one of the chorus members announces that war is brewing between their patron and the rival noble from the north. For real, as in not part of the play. Kellis realizes his play has to do more than entertain now. It has to stop the fighting. He begs B'Elanna to help him craft the perfect story, warning that if war breaks out, she could be discovered. She finally agrees and follows him to the theater, posing as a poet from across the Eastern Sea. Lena, meanwhile, has had quite enough of this and exits stage right. Act 3. Kellis, with B'Elanna this time, is still trying to break the story for the next play, trying to find the right twists. One of the other actors urges him to focus on truth over spectacle, but Kellis insists audiences want drama. For example, he brings B'Elanna to watch the rehearsal for a scene where Janeway confesses feelings for Chakotay, and let's just say B'Elanna is likely not a shipper. Meanwhile, Voyager gets a break. An alien transport ship intercepted the flyer's distress call, revealing that B'Elanna sent Harry off in an escape pod before the crash on an L-class planet. It's not much, but it's a lead. On the planet, B'Elanna still isn't on board with Kellis's approach, arguing that a bunch of love scenes won't prevent war. Kellis points out the very place they are standing in, the theater, replaced ritual sacrifice with storytelling, so why not use a play to stop the coming battle? She talks him into something much more novel, turning the story into a lesson of peace, where Janeway spares the Borg Queen instead of killing her. It's the twist Kellis needs, and the message could get through to his patron. Later that night, a jealous Lena follows B'Elanna to the crash site, expecting to confirm her own suspicions of an affair. Instead, she discovers the truth. B'Elanna isn't a rival for Kellis's affection, but she doesn't belong there, and Lena wants her to leave. If she doesn't, and dares to come to the theater tomorrow night, Lena will expose her to the Autarch, which definitely sounds bad. Lena leaves, but a new guest arrives. An exhausted Harry Kim appears outside the wreckage. He snuck around for days, using his tricorder to find B'Elanna's position, and he brought along some supplies, including the escape pod's transmitter. Act 4. It's the morning of the show, and Kellis is still trying to find the perfect ending for his play. Lena says his mysterious collaborator is likely gone, and one of the chorus says that there's no time to learn a whole new ending. Kellis is still hopeful, though, that he'll finish the story and B'Elanna will be there. The later it gets, and with the show literally starting, Kellis dispatches one of his actors to the crash site with a note for B'Elanna. During the day, though, Harry and B'Elanna were able to restore the transmitter and send a message to Voyager. Tuvok, fast asleep and snoring in the captain's chair, is awakened when the signal comes through, and Tom successfully receives the message and the point of origin. Tuvok needs a nap, but he orders a course set immediately. Back at the theater, the play begins. Janeway and 7 of 9 discuss the fate of the Delta Flyer, but the drama escalates when 7 reveals she is secretly the Borg Queen and asks the audience to keep her secret. Janeway, however, does the same thing, telling the audience that she knows. Shh. Kellis's messenger arrives at the crash site with a message for B'Elanna, that her character will be killed off without inspiration. So B'Elanna realizes that she needs to help, and she does it in the most theatrical way possible, by activating the transporter and beaming herself directly to the theater. Act 5. It's getting really dramatic now. On stage, that is. Janeway and 7 are locked in a showdown, but Janeway has the upper hand. 7 claims it's irrelevant if she dies, that Voyager will never reach Earth. And then, the twist. Janeway throws down her weapon. She imparts to 7 that they have to break the endless cycle of hatred before both sides are left with nothing. Is this breaking through to the patron? Sitting right there on the front row again? B'Elanna arrives, bursting into the backstage. Lena's not too pleased to see her, but B'Elanna is ready to put herself into the show, giving Kellis an ending he needs. She interrupts the chorus and states that B'Elanna, the Eternal, will return to the Eternals in a blaze of light. Of course, Lena tries to interrupt the interruption by calling her out, but the patron is fooled into thinking it's all part of the act. He wants to see the play's big finale. Kellis and B'Elanna resume their improvised scene, with her saying goodbye and Kellis saying he'll still be inspired when he thinks of her. And in a special effect nobody on this planet saw coming, B'Elanna beams up to Voyager. The chorus picks right up, and Kellis implores the patrons to remain wise and patient for the story to continue. The end.
Fantastic recap, John. In many ways, I found it inspiring so that technically you are my muse for this segment
Did
the
I
show.
Did I muse you?
You did. Oh, that was well done, sir.
Maybe.
Again, inspired beyond the shadow of any doubt.
Well, let's see if we can both channel Kellis a little bit and say something smart about this. So we'll see what we can do. By the way, I felt a little bit of whiplash here because I feel like we just saw some aliens imitating the Voyager crew last week.
That's a theme, right?
Yeah, kind of a strange thing to start out with, but I guess they figure, it worked then. We'll just we'll do it here, and goes without saying. But one of the very first notes that I wrote down was like, "Wow, this feels like quasi Greek theater," and they really stuck to it, which I thought was cool in order to illustrate this older society, this less developed society.
Yeah, I loved the opening scene. Mm-hmm. I loved kind of like the Roman-esque inspired armor. Yeah. Especially like the patron and his sentries. Of course, the togas, the torches, just everything about that. Very immersive. I loved kind of like the riff on the comedy tragedy masks.
Yes. Yeah. So cool.
I felt like there was a step up in production, but then you did make mention of the costumes being, Emmy nominated.
Bob
of course
Blackman
that makes sense.
Just, patting himself on the back, and as he should, for sure. I just kept thinking, like, well, now we know exactly how hard it is to write an episode of Voyager because they have these deadlines, these insane, like, you got a week to do it. How about 3? Like, no, how about 1? And it feels as we go through this episode, there's a lot of inside baseball because,
totally.
Yeah, it is Star Trek writing about Star Trek writing Star Trek. So, right. I love kind of the meta of it all. Yeah.
There's something I love about seeing like something as ancient as a candle, lighting something as the highest technology possible that we know of right now in the 24th century as the inside of the Delta Flyer. I found it's just something wonderful. I've always loved those two specific tones together, like the very antiquated versus the very high tech. It's like right now, if it would be like if I put like a candle on like my Mac Mini,
right?
Right. I'd be like, "Ooh, look at that! That looks so cool."
Yeah.
Until I forget to put out the candle, and then there's wax everywhere.
Well, see that's the problem. Like somebody who has come from live theater where there are open flames and twice caught set on fire. Open flames are tough to manage on a set, so good on them for doing that.
I thought it was really good shorthand with the bleeding aspect of B'Elanna's plight when she was unconscious. I mean, it looked barbaric, of course, but then you realize that Kellis is coming from a kind of like a superstitious background, like kind of culture, and they're like, oh, okay, so they still believe in bleeding or leeches or things like that. So it sets a certain tone where I think she kind of takes advantage of things later on.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Also, we love mentioning Arthur C. Clarke's Third Law. So Kellis using a knife in one situation and then using a dermal generator in another situation is very much a third law in practice in that scene, right?
He's confronted by magic. Yeah,
exactly. So she's like, hey, what do? Just wave it over my arm and it magically heals.
Yeah.
I have more on that later.
Oh, good. I like how Kellis is played here, and I like his chemistry with B'Elanna because they're both... B'Elanna is so headstrong anyway, but the sincerity that they both have, and I love this exchange, I need to get back home. I need another play. And he's not, because he's not portrayed at all as a bad guy or nefarious or anything, but he is so... absolutely locked into what he needs, and that makes for good drama. When you got two people in a room who have different aims, who is going to win in that? And that they play each scene like that.
I think the thing about this episode, if one really big nit to pick, and I think it's this, it's kind of traditional when it comes to science fiction, especially when it comes to Star Trek. How does a primitive alien species recognize the Delta Flyer's log's language? Because it's not as if the Delta Flyer's computer is actively translating the language to Kellis's people.
Yeah, because why would it?
You know?
Yeah.
Right. I mean, I understand like when the translator translates in real time when Starfleet is using it based on their language databases. So putting that aside, if you accept that, then the rest of the episode makes sense.
Yeah, right. Well, there's a couple of moments like that. I've got some to point out, too. Okay. I do like the effect, the kind of matte painting that we have of the crashed Delta Flyer. Now, look,
that was good.
The sense of scale is still just totally off for me when it comes to what this ship actually has. It has that huge back room. You've got apparently multiple escape pods. You got a photon torpedo in there. But the matte painting was cool.
It's like a Honda. There's a shrink ray. As soon as you like step into a Honda, no matter how big you are, you automatically fit into a Honda.
That's true. Yeah. Good right? On you, Honda.
Yeah. So that would be the Delta Accord, if you will. Yeah. B'Elanna was unconscious for 8 days.
Mm-hmm.
Was she bled for 8 days?
Ooh. Yeah. Ooh, gosh.
And then if she were bled for 8 days, then what about food and water? Wouldn't she need that? Because she's losing blood because of the fever?
Hey, that's how you cure everything. I learned it early. Looks like you could use a good bleeding. So,
are you the barber?
There's such a great moment here at the end of this act, and it is played so perfectly. Subtly, yes. I mean, they could have put an even bigger kind of, thumbprint on it. But I love this moment. The thunder crashes. And Kellis just says, "Did you?" And B'Elanna doesn't answer. She just says, "Don't get caught." So to me, it's a little bit like the Ghostbusters rule, She is neither confirming nor denying that she is a god. But it also reminded me of Hank in A Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court. He's there. He's about to get burnt at the stake. He knows there's an eclipse coming, and he just reaches out his hand as if it's him. I love it. Such a great moment.
We believe that there's no power in the Delta Flyer, according to what we've seen in the scene so far. So what exactly did B'Elanna use to give her computer power?
Yeah, they play a little fast and loose with that, where some things
like a Mophie
working.
battery pack or something like
pretty
that?
much. It'll give you like an extra 3 hours to make a phone call, but only if the phone is working, and hers is not. Yeah. Finally, I kind of like this when you get to skip a whole act and not see the Voyager crew. So I like it when this show will take its time to build up to something and let the other part of the story unfold. So that's cool. Really like coming back to the rehearsal scene because it's a little bit waiting for Guffman,
Yeah.
And I absolutely adore Lena and the shade that she is throwing to Kellis and the awkwardness of the blocking. Like, everything about that scene is correct because it's a good actor pretending to be an actor who is maybe good, maybe not great, but also having this sort of division, this personal relationship with her writer-director. The movements that she's making, like checking in with him. Am I moving too close? Not close enough? Oh, right. That's what you want to. Everything about that is pitch perfect. I must have watched that scene 20 times, just rewinding like, oh my God, the body language, the looks on their faces, perfection.
I mean, there's a reason why Kelly Waymar became such a fan favorite.
Yeah.
Not just in this episode, but in Enterprise as well.
Yeah.
I mean, I am all over the production value of these scenes. I love the toga. I love the papyrus pages. I love the entire stone theater aesthetic. It's almost like as if we got transported to like the Getty Villa.
Yeah.
Up there.
Right.
What was that? Santa Barbara? No, it's Pacific Palisades are up there. Right?
Yeah.
There's something very reminiscent about the original series Plato's Stepchildren in this episode as well.
Right.
From a production standpoint.
Right. Yeah, good point. All right, I'm going to go back to your point about how would Kellis know what the computer logs were saying. How would Kellis know what bronze is?
Right.
Because B'Elanna says, "Do you have bronze?" He's like, "Oh, yeah, bronze." Unless what was coming out in the translator was, you need to make this alloy that is part tin and part copper. oh, by the way, your word for tin is something else. Your word for copper is something else entirely. You know what? We're going to go by atomic weights. No, wait, you don't have atomic weights yet. So complicated thing to convey to somebody. Yeah.
The shorthand, again, to accept the episode, to accept where we're going with that, the conceit is very large to accept. Yeah. But at the same time, though, it is Star Trek. And if we went about that, we would be in a 3-act arc.
Yeah,
of an episode like this.
Right. Exactly. Kind of a fun thing that Tuvok, I still feel like here we are in season 6.5, coming up on the end of season 6. And we've forgotten how good Tuvok is, and just giving him a little moment, like he's working himself to death here. He's tired, and having this moment with Neelix, I thought was really good. And like even Tuvok knows that he needs to get some sleep, Right. But really nice. And also, I love this meta approach to Tuvok. Okay, because Kellis has to he understands what makes a Vulcan a great character in Star Trek, but nobody else around him understands. They have to experience it. So nice to cut from the real Tuvok to then Kellis trying to understand.
I love this line. Kellis says, logical Tuvok doesn't cry. Yes. That's why they call him logical.
Yes.
I was dying when I heard that. It was hilarious because he delivers that line so earnestly.
Yes.
Like, I was told by my muse herself, the Eternal, that this is how Vulcans are.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm the only one who understands that, aside from B'Elanna, so you guys got to listen to me. I'm the director.
Also needs to be a T-shirt. Logical Tuvok doesn't cry.
Go to work, people.
Yeah. Lucky for them that the forehead of the week with whatever the species is called on this planet kind of lends itself to B'Elanna not being so conspicuous. So she can be different. Like she's from, across the Eastern Sea. We don't really know what those people look like, but sure, we'll accept that forehead.
I love seeing the miniature of the Stone Theater when they're blocking like the whole thing. Brilliant. And I'm wondering, do you think of that as actually the miniature that they used pre-production for this to set the stage?
That would be really smart. Yeah. I could see that happening.
We need a model of this. Oh, we have this. Will this work? Sure, use that. It's very meta.
Yeah. And we do get some JC shipping right here on stage, and B'Elanna is not amused.
The eye roll is fantastic. So on point.
Love it. Hey, by the way, if you remember the escape pod on the Delta Flyer, one of apparently two, apparently there's more than one at least, huge, if we remember anything from Janeway's ill-fated mission with her lower deckers. So I'm surprised that we didn't see this massive escape pod somewhere else on the planet. But of course, save a little time, just get Harry in there. Of course, we have to have a mention of the Delaney sisters, but I actually appreciate this context here a bit more. It's not just Tom doing something dumb. And I love... we're going to keep coming back to so many of the same points, and I apologize to the audience up front. You're just going to have to bear with us. This episode of Star Trek is Star Trek doing Star Trek. And B'Elanna, in this one particular scene, she is practically quoting from the 1967 Star Trek guide, the writer-director's guide. Because she says to Kellis, she's like, when you're in the thick of it, I'm paraphrasing it, when you're in the thick of it, you're not thinking of romance because that's not realistic. That is from the Star Trek guide. That is the whole thing with Gene Roddenberry telling his prospective writers, look, if you think that the Enterprise is face down with enemy fire and the captain reaches over and, kisses or hugs his pretty yeoman, no. Because that's not how it would play out realistically if you move the same situation to Vietnam or to some real world intensive drama. I love that moment. It's so good. I also love the fact that Kellis is basically on the path to inventing a Kirk speech, which B'Elanna's is much better than all that kissing. And I really like Harry's entrance here.
Yeah, I mean, finally a win for Harry, not at his expenses,
Yeah, about time. nice bit of matte work. We were talking about how much we like the theater, and I like that matte painting of the Delta Flyer. But putting the theater in context with the landscape around it, really nice.
I mean, it was. I was trying to figure out the scale because it looked castle-esque in the background. So maybe that is the patron's, his home, and he just, he comes down from on high to, to bless his subjects with his presence in this little stone theater.
Yeah, exactly. That's what he does. Obviously, you're shrinking things for the drama of TV. And look, I did a lot of theater in my lifetime, but not 500 or 1,000 years ago, so I can't really speak to how it was done back then. But it was very funny to me that practically every scene is just the playwright backstage cranking out pages on the day of or literally during the performance. And the actors are calling him out like, we don't have time to learn this. Yet they do. So I've not been in any theatrical situation where you have somebody writing lines on the day of and everything else is going on around you. So, those things are usually very, very separate.
There was a mention of kind of like the 38th time doing the scene might be the charm. Whatever happened to our lovely 47 references? Why not the 47th?
And this is a Joe Menosky script, you would think.
I know.
Yeah. Maybe somebody above him was like, no, one too many. Okay, Tuvok asleep in the chair. Just a funny bit. And look, I don't necessarily buy in universe that he doesn't have the mental discipline to give himself a break and go get some sleep. But at least we're getting something with Tuvok here. Cutting back to the theater, I love the more and more that we see of this Greek theater style with the masks and the monologues directly to the audience, telling them what's in their minds. Wonderfully played.
I felt it was a little strange seeing John Chuck's name in the credits and seeing basically a one-line cameo from him.
I want to know
in terms of who he is, in terms of who he is in Star Trek.
I want to know what was up. I want to know if either they had written that part bigger at one point, or if John Chuck was just on the lot. Was he working on something else? Like, hey, you got a day to come join us for Star Trek?
Yeah.
Sure, why not?
I love the in-play story though about the twist about 7 of 9 being the Borg Queen, because I have the sneaky feeling though. Because I have not watched ahead. I have a sneaky feeling that there's a little foreshadowing coming from this episode.
Oh,
I could be
interesting.
wrong.
Okay.
But just...
I'm not thinking ahead, but I am thinking to some of the past episodes where at the very least, 7 is tempted to come back. And then you kind of go like, oh, wait a minute, is she or isn't she? Is she going to stay on Janeway's side? So I like that. I think that all plays in very nicely. Now, okay, we gave Harry a win earlier, but then B'Elanna has to cut him down here. Harry, have you ever inspired anybody? I thought, oh, man, that's just low. That's just low. Again, I love the whole pretense of the actors like trying to keep the show going while A, there is not a finished script, and B, B'Elanna changes the whole story anyway. But the show must go on regardless. And it was like, we're just going to keep going.
It's an evening at the Emperor.
It is. It is.
Here's a big question, though. Why have we not seen this? I'm talking about this stage play in universe, reenacted sometime, somewhere, at some convention ever.
Oh.
This would be probably the coolest recreation of an in-universe, in-meta, multi-layered referenced event, I think, at any convention, or maybe the cruise. I think this would be phenomenal.
You're so right. Okay, I want to see the whole cast. I want to see the whole cast. Yeah.
I really liked kind of the nod back to an earlier scene where like one of the older chorus members talked about the truth of performances and how the truth kind of saved the performance at the end.
Yeah.
I thought that was really well done.
Yeah, absolutely. And, that's kind of the role of the chorus in these ancient plays. The chorus are there to reveal the truths of what's going on and keep that story moving along. But yeah, just played very well here. I assume they beamed up the wreck of the Delta Flyer and the escape pod. We don't really make mention of that. And also in the same spirit that the doors of Voyager or the Enterprise or any other ship, they know the intent of the person who is standing on the other side. They know when to open or close. Whoever was on transporter duty, they knew to let B'Elanna have her last dramatic line to finish the play.
Why not make Voyager's story a musical? It could be set to the theme from Gilligan's Island, or The Brady Bunch, or The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air.
Let's start by talking about Kellis a little bit.
Right.
Because, this isn't necessarily the part of the show where we do a character dissection, or acting performance necessarily. But this is a really standout guest player, and I think they really nailed it just right, because he goes from kind of pathetic and desperate to somebody who, and maybe just a little crafty, like he's just trying to figure out how to survive from day to day, to somebody who really has an arc, somebody who really believes in the power of his art and gets the inspiration to put that to use. It's a really nice thing to see. And I love the relationship that he has with the patron, kind of navigating this very pre-technology civilization. He's a smart guy. He just doesn't necessarily have the right tools around him. He's got to rely on what he has, which is this knack for being able to craft a scene. And very much like the writers on the show, facing writer's block. How do you keep it new? How do you keep it fresh? How do you still get the point across? So I love him as a proxy for the people who are actually writing the episode. I know that I have essentially jumped ahead to the part where we really praise our guest stars, but he's so integral to the story here, and he's so integral to understanding what this episode is all about. Just a guy finding inspiration, sure, in this fantastical way, but ultimately it's about just getting the words out and how do I make somebody listen to what I'm trying to say.
What I think is interesting about this character, he seems to lean in one respect on, or at least we lean on, Arthur C. Clarke's Third Law when it comes to his relationship with when he first met B'Elanna to when B'Elanna shows him technology and how she uses it in the way that's kind of like the mystical Eternals would use technology as, in his estimation would be magic.
Sure.
So I think that was, for me, at least at the beginning, was kind of a road I was going down. I'm like, oh, is it going to be one of these episodes? But I actually looked at all of Arthur C. Clarke's 3 Laws.
Okay.
And in his book, Profiles of the Future, an inquiry into the limits of the possible, published in 1962, we know his third law. Third law says any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic.
Music to my ears. I hear it in my head every night before I go to bed.
So this is kind of like this is how we applied, or at least how I applied, how I felt about Kellis's and B'Elanna's relationship, meaning that at a certain point in the civilization's development, when technology progresses to a point where its people don't understand the underlying principles, technology can seem like magic or unexplained phenomena. Now, this is something that I think that B'Elanna was maybe utilizing in an ethical or unethical manner. I'm going to bring that up a little bit later.
That's very true, and I might be jumping ahead from your point, and I apologize, but it occurs to me, the thing about Kellis is he's not a pushover here. He has his moment of being awed. He has his moment of shock here with what's happening, but he very quickly recovers, and he's like, okay, if this is an Eternal, A, I'm going to get the Eternal on my side, know, but B, this is understandable. Like, I can actually have a conversation with this person who maybe somebody else would just never recover from the bowing and scraping, I am your servant period of that relationship.
Yeah, and I think that this is where, during the course of the episode, this is where I think they come to an understanding between the two of them. And this is where I felt going into like reading all of Arthur C. Clarke's 3 Laws, where I actually was pretty surprised how his second law was a little bit more applicable to Kellis's overall arc.
Okay.
So Clarke's second law says, the only way of discovering the limits of the possible is to venture a little way past them into the impossible.
Oh, I like that.
So there is, let me say that again.
Yeah.
The only way of discovering the limits of the possible is to venture a little way past them into the impossible, meaning that you're going to take a little bit of risk. You're going to push your idea a little further from what you think is possible to what is impossible. And in regard to Kellis's plan, the way that he and B'Elanna took his play to venture past the possibility of preventing a war by entertaining the patron with a message through his art was something that he felt at probably one point in time was not possible until he ventured forth into the impossible, because that is what his muse inspired him to do. Now, that begs the question whether or not B'Elanna acted ethically or unethically that pushed him into something that was possibly even breaking the Prime Directive.
Well, I think the episode sort of gets around that in that, if the crash is unavoidable and B'Elanna is unconscious for going on 8 days, the ship is discoverable, the ship is discovered, fortunately only by one person, and Kellis is at least able to put this into some kind of context that he understands. So what's done is done. That damage is already there. And B'Elanna does a pretty good job of walking back anything that he thinks he might be putting together about them. So she doesn't reveal anything new. She just describes relationships. She just describes actions, but not like, we're in a starship, we are more advanced than you, we have weapons. Like, none of that comes into play. So I would think that she does as good a job as possible trying to undo any potential damage. Now, once she's gone, will they continue to tell stories about her? Kellis knows, Lena knows, and the other actor, the messenger who he sends, he knows. But they're going to have a long time to debate it and then forget about it.
So here's the other layer about the Prime Directive that I thought was interesting, just in terms of playing the devil's advocate here. So, So through the application of Arthur C. Clarke's third law, B'Elanna positions herself as being the eternal muse, so that she and Kellis can influence the patron not to make war. Believing that B'Elanna is this muse from beyond, he can do this and push the actress's Janeway's message to make peace with Seven of Nine in the play as the peaceful solution against war, but that changes the patron's way of acting normally in his culture. Is that a violation of the Prime Directive?
Right. So that's a good question. And I even wrote down, I like Kellis's line here, that anger is like fire and love can extinguish it. Like, that's the starry-eyed, the aspirational version of Kellis. Like, no, we just need to say enough pretty things and have enough love in the air that then he'll forget about it. So there is a movement already on this planet to have peace. And I think at the very least, going from that understanding, like, let's put it into a moral framework, right? These people are enough like us, and I put us in quotes. That means Starfleet, or it means the Federation, or it means humans, whatever you want that to mean. They're enough like us to understand that there is a moral difference between fighting and killing each other versus cooperating and thriving together, right? And they probably understand that because objectively there is some goal. The goal is well, we all want to prosper. We all want to have whatever the things are that they value together. We want to make sure that we have enough food to eat. We want to make sure we have enough theaters to go to. We want to make sure that our kids are safe when we raise them. So there are probably some objective truths that they all agree on that are similar to the things that we agree on. And I think just by Kellis's mere presence there, and probably the rest of the people in that theater, the chorus guy running in, he's like, oh no, there's going to be a fight. Well, we don't want that. A lot of people here who don't want that. So really they only have to change one mind. And go back to City on the Edge of Forever, maybe they changed the wrong mind.
Oh, that's interesting.
We don't, like we don't really know. Okay, but even if the time is wrong, maybe the impulse, maybe the philosophy is right. So I can't really fault B'Elanna too much here for being an advocate for that side, for helping Kellis to get across his message, because he believes the message regardless, even if he can't articulate it. He believes it enough. And I would think a significant number of people around him do too.
So I wrote down the definition of the Prime Directive for Memory Alpha, just to put this into context. Yeah. So the Prime Directive says, also known as Starfleet Command General Order 1, the Non-Interference Directive, or the principle of non-interference, was the embodiment of one of Starfleet's most important ethical principles. I want to stress ethical. Non-interference with other cultures and civilizations. At its core was the philosophical concept that covered personnel should refrain from interfering in the natural, unassisted development of societies, even if such interference was well-intentioned. Now, going back to B'Elanna taking the position of this Eternal and this Muse in favor of being able, to push Kellis in one way or the other.
Yeah.
Is that ethical? And if so, there's this scene where Kellis says, she needs gold, and he says, gold is expensive. I can't afford it. And then B'Elanna says, go into debt. And then he says, tell me about the Vulcans. It's kind of like this quid pro quo, right?
Yeah.
And she says, get me the plate. I'll tell you.
Yeah.
Right? So again, you have B'Elanna acting as such, but also influences Kellis to act as such, because this, you do me a favor, I'll do you a favor, dynamic is in play. Now, she's not Starfleet per se, so is she really just acting in her own best interest as someone who's moral versus someone who's not handcuffed by the Prime Directive?
Well, that's interesting, because part of her... And by the way, you did the right thing there by mentioning, is she Starfleet? Is she not? She's technically not.
Right.
Although I guess Janeway could give her some sort of a field commission, which, it makes her an officer, but she's still not technically bound by Starfleet. She never finished the academy. She didn't, she went off and joined the Maquis.
And who is going to, who's going to court-martial them anyway? For doing that.
Yeah. Well, give Janeway a chance. But there is part of her ethos, which would be, self-preservation. You got to survive. Her goals are to get the tools that she needs to survive and get out of there, and also find Harry and all these other things. So there is some sort of a competing motivation there. And I have to wonder if it were Janeway, who is Starfleet through and through, if she's the one in that role. And there is a version of the story that you could write where it's Janeway on that planet in the Delta Flyer. And sure, you could reintroduce Harry, you could do all the other same things. But would Janeway have done anything any differently? I don't think so, because once the cat is out of the bag that, you know where to find me, you've been using my technology already by interacting with the computer on the flyer, we got to make the best of it. And part of making the best of it is, I'm going to get the tools that I need to do the least amount of damage here possible, i.e. not stay longer than I have to. And B, I can sort of nurture you along to do the things that you're going to do anyway, maybe your talent is just a little better realized after I've been here. You know?
You know, it would have been really interesting, though, in kind of like the tradition of the original series, if everything worked according to this relationship. You know, say, you know, it was, you know, a main character from the original series cast, and then this type of situation. And then all of a sudden there was the beam out, but then you learn that the war happened anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, I could see a version of that too.
You know, so
honestly,
there was like someone got chastised. Let's say Chekhov, for example, because Chekhov is the whipping boy of the original series. So, you know, Chekhov, he becomes the muse to, you know, the native, you know, in that culture. And then all of a sudden they learn that after doing everything that they did, and he tried to do everything right, at the end of it, he couldn't prevent the war from happening. And he got chastised for violating the Prime Directive. But it was kind of like, you know, a hollow victory, because it's just like, well, yeah, we can punish him for doing that, but look at what he's gone through already. Right?
It makes you wonder what the concession stand is like for these plays. Are there cheesy snacks called Neelix's Killer Cheese?
All right, Norman, we made it. We spent a couple of days at the theater in an ancient civilization and learned a thing or two about ourselves along the way. So let's sum up Muse, and let's do it the way we do, where we ask each other if the episode holds up, and we ask each other what we learned. If there was anything to learn, we will soon find out. So Muse, Norman, does the episode hold up?
I really enjoyed this episode. I had a lot of fun with it. The episode reminded me a lot of Shakespeare in Love.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
It was a movie that came out December 1998. And of course, you know, this is kind of like more like Star Trek meets Shakespeare in Love. Shakespeare in Love was, you know, it was about basically a young Shakespeare who he's like almost out of money. He's almost out of ideas. And then he meets his muse. And then he goes on to write one of his most famous plays. Right. You know, and that's what this episode kind of feels to me like in the energy of it. Also, it feels a little bit more traditional, the original series type of Star Trek, where you see the moral dilemma at the very beginning and you watch it unfold throughout really fantastic performances. And you see how the allegory of the alien characters kind of like mirrors the issues of our own societies. And that's, you know, for me, it's always been really good Star Trek. I also like something that you mentioned before. This episode actually has a more of a slow burn to it, where you see more and more of the ongoings of what's going on in the story down on the planet with B'Elanna, the Delta Flyer, Kellis, you know, the Patreon, what's going on with, I should say Patron, not Patreon.
well, maybe they've discovered Patreon on that planet by now.
Probably
too.
from that
so,
Patreon.
Yeah.
You know, the course members, all the people in the play, all of that, we spend a lot of really good time developing, you know, as part of the story, and very little time on Voyager except for certain reactions like we need to find, you know, our crewmen. So for me, I think that there's great acting, great guest stars. I think that Roxanne is finally on display again for the acting talents that she has, instead of just being angry B'Elanna, like reacting to things or throwing things or being angry at Tom. And I will give Tom credit. I think Tom actually had a really nice touching scene where he was sitting all alone in the conference room worrying about B'Elanna. So I think that was really good physical acting from Robbie. So I do think this episode holds up, because it feels, for me, what a traditional Star Trek episode should feel like. You know, it has, again, great performances, it has nuanced acting, you know, it has a great supporting cast, it has a great moral play, and a little bit of a twist at the end. Yeah. And I do want to say this, I want to go on the record, we did mention this before, but I absolutely love the production quality of this episode. Sometimes, like, the quote-unquote medieval Ren Fair trope of the week in a science fiction show feels like that. But I felt like in this case, the decisions made for the production were very purposeful, very unique, very deliberate. and they didn't become obtrusive or kind of obvious, as a trope goes. I found the format of the Shakespearean play very applicable, very believable, just in case in the world building. But here's the thing that I want. I want this to become something real. I want somebody out there, a troupe of actors out there, create this for conventions or events or somewhere. Because I think that this thing, kind of like Rocky Horror Picture Show, it demands to be recreated for our audience, our Star Trek audience.
Hard agree.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I have to say about this episode, when I first watched it, when I was first getting into it, I thought, this is weird. And am I really connected to this story of this, pre-industrial society? Like you said, Star Trek and sci-fi in general will rely on this kind of like ancient world motif because honestly it's cheap. But then you go back and you watch and you go like, well, no, but this isn't cheap. These things are intentional, and this is a fully formed world, and we have a lot of fully formed characters here. And after I watched it, and after I really kind of dug into it, I felt like, well, this is a weird episode. It's a bold choice, and thank goodness, because it is one of those Joe Menosky scripts where he will get this wild creative bug and just run with it, and then you see the brilliance of it. It's really smart. And one of the things that I especially appreciate about this story is that it is Star Trek talking about making Star Trek. And it's a fun way then for the audience to be able to reapproach those stories and those characters. And honestly, the whole reason for there even being a Star Trek in the first place. Like, we talk about episodes where Star Trek will reassert its values very often in a you see Timmy moment. Mm-hmm. But this is Star Trek saying, no, this is why we do what we do, in addition to giving you the lesson. And I love the little nods to the audience, like Kellis having an argument with his actor, the actor saying, like, audiences today, they just want spectacle, And of course, this is the argument ever since, well, certainly before Star Wars, like, special effects, like, that's what drives the audience today, but we really want stories with character. Mm-hmm. That will always be the argument when a new technology comes along to change the way that stories are told. So I love Star Trek doing Star Trek. In an episode, really often, it's the well-placed monologue, breaking through to the one who needs to hear it. So here's the fictional show within the fictional show that tries its hardest to impart us with a good idea or two after all the adventure and a little bit of humor, to paraphrase Gene Roddenberry. So it really works. Like, it's strange. It is an odd episode. And I think under any other context, in less talented hands, we may not both be feeling that about this episode. But they really got it right here. Which leads to the question, did they get it right when it comes to those morals, meanings, messages? So what have you got, Norman?
Well, I mean, I think that there's a pretty consistent, and it was, I think, established very early on that the arts have influence over the masses still, for better or worse. Mm-hmm. But there's a scene that I thought was really interesting. There's an Elder Chorus member, I think this is in Act 3, when B'Elanna and Kellis were looking at the miniature, and one of the Elder Chorus members said to Kellis, "Find the truth of your story, and you won't need all those tricks."
Right.
I don't know how things are done across the Eastern Sea, but here, poets have become lazy. They rely on manipulation to move their audience. It wasn't always that way. Welcome. B'Elanna says thank you, and then Kellis says, "The truth of my story, it's an old-fashioned idea. Today, audiences want excitement and passion."
Yeah.
So I found this interesting because, you have this elder statesman saying that the truth, you can still tell it through the way the arts can tell it. Mm-hmm. But then Kellis also makes a very good argument of, as you said in another quote, anger is like fire. Love can be the rain that extinguishes it. My patron is filled with hatred for his rivals, so our play should be filled with love. And then B'Elanna says, you can't change somebody's way of life with a few lines of dialogue. And this is why, like, when he pushes back, because I can see people doing this today. Kellis says, yes, you can. It's been done before. Do you know what this place used to be 100 years ago? A temple. And this was the altar stone. Every year, a victim would be sacrificed on it in honor of winter. And then one year, nobody remembers exactly when or why, a play took place at the ritual and no one had to die here again. Why can't my play take the place of a war?
Yeah.
So I see both sides of this moral equation. Being able to use the arts to express the truth and to establish said truth and be the trusted way of being able to learn about the world around you as arts used to be, or using today's social media mediums in the way that a certain age group does to passionately convey their ideas, because the traditional ways of trying to tell certain truths can't be heard unless there is the passion and then there is the excitement, and all of that. It's not trickery. It's just a different strategy to cut through the noise, because when you try to fight fire with fire, if you're on equal terms, you have to have enough fire to be able to, to vanquish, the untruths out there. And there are a lot of them. So I think the moral of the story, again, for me, you can use art to tell the truth, but you can also use art to tell the truth in a way that cuts through the noise and reaches the right people. And if that means making a modification to it, but the intent is still there, and the effect that you need is going to be able to change people's lives for the better, that may be the best way to go too.
Interesting. I've been kicking around the same ideas in my head when it comes to the morals, meanings, messages of this episode. First of all, big shout out again, because I think Kellis, our guest role here is just so good. And I love this imposter syndrome that he's fighting and really earnest, trying to be better at his art. But I really landed, like you did, on this sort of question about the power of art. And I think I go back and forth in my own estimation of what that is. And I don't think that art can force someone to act against their nature. And I don't think that the perfectly delivered speech can change someone's worldview. But every now and then, maybe the messages break through in the right context if the right elements are there. I want to think that that's the case, and I want to think that that's why artists do what they do. But then I started fighting my own message there. I started thinking against that value. And I came to this place where I started thinking maybe a little too deeply about this episode. And I thought, okay, well, let's look at what you and I do. We do Mission Log because we're looking at Star Trek seriously. We're looking at the stories here seriously. The same way that Kellis is looking at his story seriously to impart an idea to people who need to hear the message. And we're just a slice of a slice of a slice of that audience, who some watch it all, they can cite it all chapter and verse. Others just kind of casual fans come and go, cool, look at the spaceships. That's all legitimate. That's all a good way to enjoy Star Trek. There's no right or wrong way. But then I kept asking myself, for as much time and effort and mental energy as we spend going, these are important, these have messages to share, is it working? We're talking about a show that's been around for nearly 60 years. We're talking about a format that has been around for nearly 60 years. And every one of these series and every one of the episodes within those series starts out from the minds of people like Kellis who go, no, I really have something that's important to say, and I really need to get it across. And we look back at a show that is nearly 60 years old, and we go, wow, they really were trying to move the needle on perception about racism and sexism and war and xenophobia and all these important topics of the time. And then Star Trek didn't go away. It got reinvented every generation along the way. It kept bringing us newer and newer stories. And I look at it now, and we have just come out of a few years where there is more Star Trek available to us than at any other time. And I go, yeah, but the world around us didn't change. The people who needed to hear those stories obviously didn't hear them or were never presented with them in the first place. And I don't want to think that those stories are unimportant. I don't want to think that the discussion of those stories are unimportant. But I kept asking myself, like, if they haven't broken through in 60 years, are they ever going to break through at all? And I can't imagine who it is contemporarily that needs to be sitting in an audience watching a show like Star Trek that says, no, you should actually work for peace, and you should work together, and you shouldn't judge people based on the way they look or their sexuality or how they identify. Those are all anathema to our values. I don't know where those people are, and I don't know why they're not there getting that message, because I don't see things getting particularly better. And I hope like hell that I am wrong, and I hope that these stories are still valuable and they still have impact and they reach the right people in the right amount of time.
Mission Log is produced by Roddenberry Entertainment. If you would like to support us directly, you can do so at patreon.com/missionlog for early access to shows in the Mission Log Discord. Our website is missionlogpodcast.com, and for more Star Trek news and discussion, visit trekmovie.com.
On the next Mission Log, Fury.
Some of the music for Mission Log provided by Warp 11, online at warp11.com. Special thanks to consulting producers, Matt Esposito, Homer Frizzell, Chris Garris, Rand Hurl, Tom Kozak, Julie Miller, Mike Richards, Mike Shabel, Paul Shadwell, and David Takachi. 4 words for you, hear me out. Voyager the rock opera, come on, Kellis, let's make this happen. Have your people call my people. End transmission.
This is a Roddenberry podcast. For more great podcasts, visit podcast.roddenberry.com.